Good afternoon, evening, morning, whenever you find your way to see this. Yes, there is daylight out. So I had the day off. I'm able to record during the day. It's a fun time. And yes, I'm using my day off to record and talk about HBCU football with my friend Duane. Duane, how's everything going?
Man, you talk about days off and talking about HBCU football. I just wish that I would have those moments in terms of not being able to do so. Um, Let me take that back. I thoroughly enjoy HBCU football. I do. There is nowhere in the world you would tell me that I will be talking HBCU football nonstop throughout a calendar year. I thought I would have at least gotten some sort of reprieve because of basketball, track and field, baseball, softball, bowling, something. No, there's been something that's been in the news almost every week to keep me talking about HBCU football. And I just want to talk about something a little bit different, but at the same time, I don't mind talking about it at the same time. If that sounds understandable, but yeah, it's been a it's been
So
a interesting past a few months to say the least.
I understand that for sure. I mean, especially with Jackson and I and All-Star game rushes, like
Yeah,
seeing week after week. I mean, we loved it, but it was like, man, like another All-Star game this week. Can we move on to other stuff? So totally understand the fatigue.
but yeah,
Um,
you had the combine this past weekend. You had a Hugh Jackson hire another offensive coordinator that comes with its own bag of issues, if you will. I just haven't heard much of a response to it as much of course as Art Browse, because of course he's more of the name. But yeah, can't stop, won't stop. It's very much so like Diddy.
I like the reference. I miss the Grambling hiring for sure. I mean, I thought they would have taken a little bit more time in hiring a replacement, but I'm not. Who do they hire? I'm not aware of who they got.
Wow. I completely forgot the gentleman's name. He's a former assistant. I just can't remember the program, but he also comes with his own bag of sexual harassment claims and Title IX issues too, which is something that I don't know if this is some sort of just strange science experiment by Hugh Jackson to try to prove a point to say that, was the sexual harassment the issue, or was Art Briles the issue in this hire, or did he just not vet this gentleman's history oddly enough where it just didn't take a reporter that much time to find out that he had his improprieties as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting for sure. I mean, I guess you would think that Hugh Jackson, just with all his years in the NFL, would be a pro at vetting assistants, but I mean, here we are. So I guess we'll see. I remember you tweeted out with Art Browse, like your answer to whether it was a good hire or not was, well, I guess I forgot what adjective you used, but I guess your short answer was if they beat Jackson State, Southern, and I guess one of the FBS teams are playing, then it's a good hire. Then people will be
Arkansas
quiet.
State, yeah, if they go,
Arkansas State.
yeah, if they go 3-0, and of course within that schedule, you have that Arkansas State game, which is the FBS opponent. You have Northwestern State, um, a program that I kind of have history on another podcast talking about as well, and as it pertains to them competing against the matter of fact, it was against Grambling in the past. So if they were to come away with wins in both of those games, or at least one of those, and then defeat Jackson State, yeah, I think people would quiet down a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I'm surprised you put Northwestern State in that like sort of big game category. I know it's at Independence Stadium in Shreveport, but the schools they meet, so little that I thought, it's a cool event, I think. But I mean, I
Oh
didn't think Grambling fans cared that much.
no, I don't think it's necessarily a big game. It's just the fact that it's within that 3-game stretch before they head out to Daytona in week 4. That if they get that win, a team that they haven't beaten. I think last time they faced, they lost to Northwestern State. But yeah, if they're capable of getting at least one of those wins against those two teams and then beat Jackson State, winning cures all ills. We've heard that moniker before, and I understand that there will still be some detractors there if he were to have stayed and they were to have won, but it wouldn't have been as much had they went ahead and I guess in some people's eyes shocked the world by beating Jackson State.
Absolutely. I mean, the phrase you use, winning cures all ills. I mean, we've seen it throughout the history of sports. So, I mean, only time will tell. Yeah, only time will tell. Truly intriguing. I mean, Grambling seems like they can't avoid being the center almost of the call of the HBCU football universe, it seems.
Well, not this offseason, at least, with a lot of the things that they've been through in terms of dating back to the Hugh Jackson hire, to them stealing recruits from Southern. And then, of course, the Art Browse hire, the 4 days that happened after that, his resignation, and then the hiring of this new offensive coordinator as well, with the anticipation of this season, with all of the movement that you have with the coaches within the SWAC. And then, of course, the returning power of Jackson State to see whether or not they'll be capable of running it back and repeating as conference champions.
I mean, yeah, so much to really, I guess, unpack this offseason. I mean, this week seems like a light week. I mean, with Tennessee State sitting on the SWAC. I don't know why they're sitting on it. It seems like a no-brainer, but in
my eyes, they have to have eyes for something bigger than the SWAC if they're just sitting on this. Because like you said, in my opinion, it's a no-brainer as well. I'm not going to say it's something that the entire alumni base wants, but I've heard murmurs from some of the alums and some of the fans of Tennessee State and from the SWAC who would love to see that move happen. It just happens to be that the AD is a little hesitant on this, and it's weird because I think I may have said on this show before. It was I heard on the streets back during the fall that yes, the SWAC was looking to expand, but it wasn't with Tennessee State. And then all of a sudden, now the ball is in their court and they're open to do it. And Tennessee State is humming and hawing on whether or not they want to make this move.
Yeah, I mean, I'm puzzled to be honest. I mean, I think, like I said, a no-brainer. I mean, the OVC has to do a scheduling alliance with the Big South. Doesn't seem to be beneficial. More travel, and then you look at it too with the Celebration Bowl. I think the payoff's better. I mean, Tennessee State hasn't really been a player in the FCS playoffs, so why not play for something bigger? I get if the odds are the same. So
yeah,
just my take on it.
No, I completely understand. I just like to break it down sometimes for the dummies out there. Look at it like this. Okay, take your fine woman of choice. I'm just going off the cuff, be it Halle Berry or whomever, but you feel as though that you have a chance with an unpregnant Rihanna. You're going to hold out to see if you can have your chance with Rihanna before you go ahead and say, well, I'll go ahead and I'll settle for Halle Berry. And I think that's the same thing that Tennessee State is doing. They're waiting to see if they have better options elsewhere. I don't know what that option is. Is it a move to another FCS conference that is not the SWAC? Could it be the Southland? Could it be another conference that's there within their region? Or is it a thought that they can move up to the FBS? But of course, the finances that it takes in order to make that move is something they have to wrap their head around as well. So, yeah, I understand being patient, but yeah, you got something, a sure thing waiting there for you. And you're looking for consistency, and your head coach wants to play in a HBCU conference. Why not?
Absolutely. I mean, I enjoy with Batman out. I mean, how the Halle Berry reference. I mean, I guess the Catwoman of old.
Yeah, you want Halle Berry, or do you want Zoe?
Zoe Kravitz.
Zoe Kravitz. Which one do you want? They both fine, but which one do you want? You want Zoe Kravitz, Halle? I got Halle, but Zoe's been texting me. She's been she's been stepping in my DMs. I might want to investigate that to see what that looks like.
I think that's a great way to close the book on the Tennessee State to the SWAC talk. So I mean, for our main topic too, another I guess sort of intriguing but lower level topic. We've been seeing the schedules of both MEAC and SWAC teams sort of cascading down slowly but surely. Today, after all, North Carolina Central released their schedule with a very interesting non-conference slate, with the exception of Virginia Lynchburg. No offense to them, but they seem to be the punching bag of HBCU football. very, very sad, but it is what it is. So one school that hasn't, I think the last MEAC school that to not release their schedule, or second to last, because South Carolina State hasn't either, is Howard. And Howard, of course, last year having the Truth and Service Classic, in Audi Field, the home of the DC United, and
Yes, sir.
former home of DC Defenders. I almost said DC Defenders first. They're not the main ticket team. So, but that being said, the game was a solid draw for the real HU rivalry against Hampton. This year, that game is a home game against Hampton. So, looking at Howard's schedule, I mean, I gotta say, first off, they're classiced out. They already have the the Morehouse game at MetLife Stadium on CNBC on September 17th, and of course, to kick off the year, the great primetime game, the MEAC SWAC Challenge against Alabama State. So, I guess the first question with that point is, do you see the Truth and Service Classic being put on the back burner because Howard is already playing those two classics?
There's a possibility, right? Because my guess is that you've seen the same slate of games that I've seen for Howard, and I haven't seen an official schedule come from them yet either. And the only other team that they don't have on their schedule is currently set up as a 9-game schedule, right? With the potential of one OOC, because they don't have South Carolina State on that schedule that I've seen. Is that the same schedule that you've seen too, Omar?
Yeah, just on FB schedules, just like counting them by hand.
Yeah. So looking at that schedule, the South Carolina State date is the one that's missing. I doubt very seriously that they play a conference game that early. So as of right now, there's a possibility that it could be a back burner game. It's normally that first or second week in September, and as you saw on that schedule, they already have dates for those two games. The one thing though that they don't have a lot of is a lot of home games based upon that schedule. So that South Carolina State game will be a home game for them. So chances are that other opponent just might either be a game in Green Stadium, or it could be an opportunity for them to go ahead and attempt to promote that as the Truth and Services Classic. Now, who that game is going to be against, I have no conceptual idea, but I have some inklings on where that team might come from.
Yeah, and that's what we're here to figure out, I guess. We're sort of, detect. And we're just going to go through the options. Starting off, we mentioned South Carolina State a little. I guess that'll be the first school we discuss, defending HBCU national champions. A team, I think, I'm not sure if they travel well. Distance, of course, is a concern, being from Orangeburg. What do you think the likelihood of the game being played later on in the season, just to accommodate the Truth and Service Classic being played against the defending HBCU champs?
Wow. It would be interesting for them to do that. To have that matchup. The question is, of course, if they're moving it later on in the season, it will. You would hope at that point that Howard is playing good enough football for them to be considered a MEAC champion, or at least to compete against South Carolina State in that matchup, to where the title hopes will be on the line in that particular matchup. Because if it's not, then it's a possibility that I don't know if Audi Field is a big enough draw to make South Carolina State fans travel up from Orangeburg to come up to DC for that weekend. But of course, depending upon what that weekend is, it's still DC. Of course, I still love my city, my hometown. But I don't know if it's going to be big enough to outdo what they did last year with Howard and Hampton.
Yeah, and I mean that's definitely what I'm thinking too. I mean that's a good point. As in, I guess it's the same city. Like, it's not a new travel experience. You're still going to DC at the end of the day. So that's dollars spent to see a soccer stadium. In the end, it's not even FedEx Field, but it's a soccer stadium. So I mean that's a good point too. That I didn't really think of either. I mean I love neutral site games. Whether it's in the same city or not. It's just fascinating. Feels like a bowl game. I'm not sure many South Carolina State fans feel that same way. So definitely something to think of there with them. in terms of the other MEAC home game that they have, this one I think is more of a likely option due to geography. But what do you think about Delaware State? I'm not sure if the Hornets travel well. They were I think they were sub 100 in FCS attendance this past year, and it's kind of sad because the team is up and coming.
They are, and that's one of those teams that had a pretty good season in my eyes. You know, if I was as Coach Milstead, of course he would be disappointed. 16 points is what separated them from winning a MEAC. Well, 17 points is what separated them from winning a championship in those 3 losses that they had. So, you know, a play here, a play there is what separated them from making that trip to Atlanta. And then, of course, with Coach Milstead's tied to the DC area, I don't know necessarily it would be, again, a big enough draw for them to have that game in Audi Field. They will probably be best off having that game in Green as well. And again, that's one of those things that I know most definitely the DC area and Howard has to do a better job in is engagement in people who live in the area to come out and check those games out, because that's something that they're sorely lacking and have been for some time. And it can only be attributed to one thing, and of course that's the fact that 2 things: there aren't any marquee players on the team, and the way that the team has performed in recent years.
Absolutely. I mean, the marquee player point, I feel like we've talked about that before in terms of Kalen Newton, Jaquez Ezzard. If you look at those years, I mean, they played in the Chicago Football Classic in 2019. Of course, that was a Hampton game. And in 2018, I think it was the Circle City Classic. And I think part of that was the 2017 season where they beat UNLV. They did really well in the MEAC. But I guess just losing those players. And of course, the dreaded, let's see, how many letters is it? And it's the dreaded 8 letters, dreaded 8 letters. The coach that shall not be named, kind of pushed them away. So it's a good point there. I mean, of course, geography is a draw too in terms of Dover. But I mean, if Delaware State fans traveled better, I feel like that could be an option. But it really is a shame, and I don't know how much of that is due to Delaware State Stadium, I guess, not being. I guess I just don't think it's in as great of an area in terms of, because I remember watching the South Carolina State Delaware State game in the spring and seeing a car dealership in the background. I'm like, I've never seen anything like that before. So I mean, the area I don't think is that great of a draw. So I don't really blame the fans for not traveling well. But no insults towards the program. I've always said that Delaware State is up next in the MEAC, and I firmly believe that.
Well, I'll say this in a mild defense to Delaware State. If you get the right angle, and it's been done several times in BB and I'm sorry, it's Truist Stadium now. I keep forgetting. God, I don't know what changes more, the name of the football stadium or the conferences that the A&T football team is in. But yeah, at the right angle from Truist Stadium, you'll see some interesting sights over there on Summit Avenue. I'm sorry, that's not Summit, that's Bessemer Avenue. So yeah, you'll see some interesting. No, wait a minute, that is Summit Avenue. See, oh my God, I should know my Greensboro streets. But yeah, you'll see some interesting sights over in that corner over there, and you'll wonder, oh my God, how close? Because they're right there next to a neighborhood, and then right over from that neighborhood is Bessemer Avenue, which is a busy thoroughfare over there in Eastern Greensboro, and you'll see like certain billboards and a used car dealership I think you can see over there, and some other things. But of course, it's winning football, or up until 2021, competitive football, and of course that fan base enjoys coming out to Truist Stadium to check out that team, so they don't necessarily care. Dover is Dover. I've heard stories about it. I just haven't been. I would love to go. Hopefully I'll get a chance to do that this upcoming season. But yeah, I see your point in terms of the things that surround that stadium and how it can or cannot be a detractor from coming out to check out that place to check out a game. But yeah, if you get some winning football in that stadium in Dover, I don't think they care.
Yeah, I mean that's a good point too. I mean, yeah, like we said, winning cures all ills, even architectural and city planning ills. So, with that, I guess the next option would be looking at the schedule is an unknown. Before I want to get to, I guess, a spicy topic, would be an unknown opponent. And looking at sort of the teams that are in need of games, you have a couple of the teams in the Big South still, like Robert Morris. Robert Morris owes Howard a home game. Not sure if that's not sure if that was a one-off game. And I don't think that Robert Morris will be considered for a neutral site game in the MLS stadium. But another Big South team looking for non-conference game is your alma mater, North Carolina A&T. I want to know, are there sore feelings with North Carolina A&T leaving the MEAC, and even more sore feelings from them beating Howard 64-6 in their last meeting? I'm not trying to insult, but I mean I can understand like if there's like a thing with like running up the score or anything that the Howard administration is kind of sore about.
Well, I don't know if the Howard administration is still sore about it. Of course, this is a new coaching staff. I laugh because, of course, I was at that game. I was hoping more from that game. God knows the name that I will not say had. I actually had that as a marquee matchup for that year with the way that offense had looked. Well, this was also before. God, I see his face. I just can't remember his name. The former head coach at Howard that is now at William and Mary.
Mike London.
Mike London, yes. With that offense, that go-go offense with Mike London and the way that they looked in prior seasons and the fact that they had never faced that go-go offense had never faced a Blue Death defense before. And this would have been Kalen Newton's marquee game within the conference. Going down to Greensboro for A&T's homecoming. Oh my God, I was hoping for the best only to get the worst out of that game. And the worst for Howard, that is. And I'll say this, in the press box, we were more concerned about the MLB playoffs actually it wasn't in the press, it was the World Series with the Nationals in the World Series than we were about the game. We were talking about records that were going to be set. They were a touchdown away from setting the most points scored within a game record against Howard in that matchup. But since then the players have all been removed for the most part. Coaching staff is most definitely different at Howard right now. Like you said, but A&T is most definitely looking for a game. But to answer your question in terms of whether or not Howard or the MEAC has any disdain towards North Carolina A&T, they probably have a little, especially with the fact that the MEAC tried to bring A&T back into the conference, and their response was a no, and of course the commissioner was not a fan of it.
Absolutely. I mean, just going back to your analogy on me early on, the CAA it's definitely a sexier option for sure, because it is the closest thing that we're going to get to a super conference, at least now in the FCS. And I mean, you think about the power that resides in the conference. Like it's hard for them to say no. I'm sure the MEAC would understand it was worth at least a try. But in terms of non-conference games and what's on the schedule, I think NCAA is the best HBCU option for this game. I'm not sure if A&T fans traveled well generally to DC. It's been a while since they even played in DC. Like I was searching for the last game. I forgot what year it was.
That would have been 2018.
Okay.
That was the last time in which they played here. Not only does A&T travel well, we have a huge alumni base here too. So we would do our best to go ahead and fill out Audi Field to go see that game. And for some of us who probably haven't had an opportunity to see A&T play football since 2019, for those of us that didn't want to travel to Greensboro or to go see them play against Big South opponents, me included, it will be the first time to see them play since that season, and to do so within Audi Field, a venue that's larger than Green, that looks a lot better than Green, and is more accommodating than Green. And so it's all of those advantages for Audi Field plus the fact that there's a huge fan base here, that yes, most definitely that will be a wonderful HBCU opponent to do that. But that would have to be a game that would have to be later on in the season, seeing as though that A&T does have their September schedule already set.
Yeah, I mean, I think as we talk about it more, I mean, seems like a likely option. I mean, it makes sense. The only thing that would get in the way is hurt feelings. I don't think that exists between the two schools in particular, rather than the big picture of the MEAC. I think it's interesting too, because this could be a rare opportunity for this game to happen, because joining the CAA, North Carolina A&T will be in the service academy dilemma, and I'll explain that because you have with with Air Force and Navy. I mean, you have Army and Navy, or the other service academies being 2-year non-conference games. So your freedom is highly restricted, especially for Navy, who has one slot each year. A&T will likely be in that situation too, because one of the games will likely be a paycheck game, and the second one will likely be the Aggie Eagle Classic. So this could be a rare game, and both schools could try to make this happen before. I mean, I guess it's too late.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And to your point, that's something that A&T has discussed in terms of wanting to continue to happen, is to at least have one, if not, well, they're going to have Hampton on the schedule on a regular basis, with them also moving over to the CAA. But they're still wanting to play against as many HBCUs as possible, or as allowed within their schedule. And if that opportunity arises and they come to them, right, it's a possibility that this could be a potential game, especially later on in the season.
Absolutely. I mean, even then, like, I guess it'll feel, even though they're not in the same conference, it'll feel like a conference game, feel like a rivalry for sure. So that could be something that the Truth and Service Classic looks at. Moving on to, I think, the last and probably most intriguing option is the 10,000 men of Harvard, because the Crimson play Howard on October 15th, and I haven't looked at the at DC United schedule. I'm not sure if it would accommodate it at Audi Field at least. But if you talk about a rare game, yes, NCAA Howard is a rare game, but Howard is even rarer. In terms of just Ivy League schools playing HBCUs, this will only be the third such matchup, I think, ever, at least since 1984. So rare, really unprecedented matchup. Harvard is a brand in FCS football, and I mean, you can even argue all of college football. But I mean, they are an Ivy League school. They are a PWI. So what do you see the chances of this happening? Do you see Howard sort of seeing the rareness and the special feel of this game and making it their spotlight game at Audi Field, or sort of keeping it at Green?
That's a wonderful question. Based upon what I saw in the game against Notre Dame, the basketball game, back on Martin Luther King birthday in January, and the turnout that they had for that game, I don't think necessarily them being a PWI would be an issue, especially if Harvard fans are willing to come to DC, and the Harvard alums that are currently here in DC, if they're going to be willing to come out to see this game played. I don't know if it'll necessarily be a huge draw for Howard fans, but that opportunity of them competing against an Ivy League team what could be an attraction. But I don't see that necessarily being a horrible option. It is a viable one, most definitely, and that is one an opportunity that you could push that game, because if memory serves me, I think the both of them have truth within their mottos. So if that's a situation too, then of course that's another way you can market that game. But I don't necessarily see it as being a bad idea for them to try to do that. But I just want to know whether or not that game and the attendance numbers, whether or not that will be capable of covering the cost of holding that game in Audi Field.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great point, honestly, about, I guess, them being a PWI not being a problem. I did forget about the Notre Dame game, and that being a special event with everything tied to it, the Fox broadcast and everything. So absolutely, I mean, I don't think that'll be an issue. I think honestly too, if you throw in another aspect in terms of television with NBC Sports at least having the Ivy League contract up until recently, I think they would welcome that. That game being on CNBC or even USA for that matter. Just given their past. But of course, that is something that would pay homage to something that only TV broadcast nerds like ourselves would really value. But
Yeah.
I think the one caveat is there is sort of some recent precedent to Harvard playing a sort of a spotlight game in DC. This game is it makes me kind of sad anytime I think about it. But the last game at RFK Stadium, Georgetown, Harvard in 2017. I think RFK deserved a way better send-off, and that's no offense to Georgetown, but I think the game was poorly promoted, judging by the attendance. Only 3,256 people went to that game. Was some of that due to Georgetown really not having much of a name in football? I think a lot of it is due to that. But Boston to DC, it's a manageable trip if you plan it. So I'm a little bit disappointed in Harvard's numbers in that game. So I wonder if Howard looks at that and I guess keeps it at green and saves on some costs.
Possibility. Like you said, it's a doable trip. Catch the train straight down. And have I forget what the name of that train is that goes from DC to Boston with limited stops in Philly and New York. But it's a way to do that. And then of course, like I said before, the amount of Harvard alums that are here, is something that could be a potential draw. God, and I just actually saw that, yes, Harvard's motto is Latin for truth. So there is a way for them to go ahead and market that game that way. If my thought is, though, if your thought is attendance is going to be a detractor for holding a Truth and Services game this season, then based upon what they currently have on their schedule for their current home games, you might not want to do it this year then, if you're afraid of that. Because, yes, like I said before, the Harvard game could be dicey in terms of what that attendance could be, but it also could be a boom. It could be a bust. But, yeah, if they're concerned about whether or not it's going to work, I would say just do it at Crane.
So my I guess rebuttal or sort of question with your last point, which I think is very valid. Like why mail it in, when you can put all your resources into it next year when it makes a lot more sense, is if it's going to be Hampton every other year when it's a Howard home game, why call it the Truth and Service Classic? And maybe it's not a big deal, but it just kind of annoys me.
No, I get you. I do. But I will say it's a huge possibility that the landscape of collegiate football has affected what that schedule has become and what that game has become, especially for this upcoming year, with them potentially having to scramble and get an opponent to fill up that spot. Because who's to say that they probably didn't have something already set up for that week, and it just happened because of circumstances it fell through. But again, who knows? I have no idea. I haven't heard if there were any future plans for the Truth and Services game. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see if that thing was a one-off or not. I hope that it wasn't, and I'm hoping that it's not going to be an alternating year where it's only Howard and Hampton. But we'll have to wait and see when the rest of the schedule comes out.
Absolutely. And it's already March. Had to check my calendar really quick. It's already March. I'm wondering like what's the wait, honestly. But could just be me itching for football season. As we all do.
There's still schools out there still trying to finish up their schedules and trying to fill up holes. And like you said, they still have that one open date that they might look to fill. And trying to figure out who that opponent might be.
Exactly. So I guess it is waiting game, and I guess you can't blame Howard for waiting, I guess, because they're not behind the curve. If you look at a lot of teams, even in the CAA, a lot in the more prominent conferences have. slots to fill. Excuse me. So yeah, I mean, I sure hope this game's not a one-off because I do like the Truth and Service logo. I want to get a shirt of that Buffalo football. I know that's a good name for that logo, but it's a cool logo, honestly. I think it's one of the cooler HBCU classic logos. I think yeah, I mean, it's maybe it's not as creative, but I mean it's different, you know. I mean, ties in the program both well in the event. That being
Definitely.
said, I think this wraps up the discussion. I really enjoyed talking neutral site games, and I guess sort of like the science behind getting a good neutral site game, and the economics, everything goes into it because it's truly a lot. I mean, it could be a social studies topic in either high school or even undergraduate. You know, it's quite interesting.
Well, yeah, I would most definitely lean towards that as an undergraduate case study. Well, actually, even as a master's or doctoral case study. Yeah, if you guys haven't checked out Dr. Kenyatta Cavill of the HBCU Sports Lab, has a show on YouTube. He most definitely has done studies as it pertains to HBCU athletics, and it's odd. He actually did a study on what it would take for Tennessee State to move to the SWAC years ago. And he's like re-released that. So for those who are interested in checking that out, you can most definitely look for that and find that too. But yeah, those are one of the things that can be discussed and pondered upon and theorized on what makes a great HBCU classic and where the best places or the best venues for those games will be. Because with that said, I'm going to be very intrigued to see exactly how this Howard Morehouse game turns out over at MetLife, because we've seen what the turnout has been at RFK those years that they had them there, and it never peaked past 15,000. But for whatever reason, that Howard game at MetLife has been capable of doing 25 to 30,000. And then, of course, with the amount of alumni that both Howard and Morehouse have in the New York region that will be willing to go see that game there, it's a possibility they may be able to do at least 20,000 again this year. So that's one game I'm most definitely keeping my eye on to see how the attendance numbers do.
Absolutely. And I think sort of the test run is the MEAC SWAC challenge to see how much Howard fans feel, even though I do really think that, I mean, I guess it's a no-brainer that Alabama State fans are likely going to fill Center Park Stadium because Montgomery is 2 hours away down I-85. I mean, so but then again, 3 weeks later, we reload and do it with Morehead. Why do I keep saying Morehead? Morehouse. It's because I was looking at the Pioneer Football League schedule, and but with Morehouse State, definitely not Morehead State, but with more.
It's not even Morehouse
not
State.
Morehouse State. Gosh, dang it, man! I got to edit that out.
Don't worry, I have those too. So hey, the best of us, it hits us too, most definitely.
Yeah, I gotta edit that out. I mean, that's a bad screw up. But with Morehouse, because again, I was thinking the same thing too. Like, it seems like insanity, you know, in the mid Atlantic and Northeast region having this game played. So I guess they're trying it again. And they're trying it with MetLife, which honestly, being at MetLife once, it's not a welcoming venue, kind of in the middle of nowhere. It's kind of like a brick. I think it's a brick. That's the best way to describe it.
Wow.
It's not a bad stadium. It's just like, it's not unique. I just think that's just my opinion.
I mean, I'm not too surprised by that. I have not made my way to MetLife, so I in East Rutherford, so I have no idea. God, being a Commanders fan, I don't know if I ever will. It's just certain venues, man. I know I can't step my foot in without there being any type of harassment or issue. And my old hands aren't built for that right now. But yeah, I'm like I said before, I'm just really intrigued to see what those numbers are based upon what I've seen Howard do there in the past. And I'm still, again, it goes back to community engagement, especially here in the area, and why it's such a big deal. I mean, it's a once in a season thing to do it at MetLife. So I guess that's why those fans go, when you could just go to a Howard game 3, 4, 5 times out of the year. And again, if they're not playing well, you're not necessarily missing anything. And I guess that's how the community feels about it. But I wish they would feel a whole lot better about it and going out to see a young team that is on the verge of getting better. You know, they have 2 3-star recruits coming in. Eaton James, the son of Edgerrin James, is going to be coming in playing running back in that backfield. It's going to be a 3-headed monster running the ball with Quentin Williams slinging that thing around. That offense is going to be very interesting to see how they develop from last year to this year and see whether or not if they can go on an upward trajectory.
Absolutely. I mean, I think what I think about too when I think of Howard, I think of the same thing with Delaware State, with them being a sort of that. I mean, the MEAC is as open as it's ever been, in my opinion. I know South Carolina State ran through the league this past season, but you look at Howard losing to South Carolina State by only 3 points. I mean, Howard found a way to beat Sacred Heart, a playoff team that beat one of the more that beat. I mean, a team with one of the best defenses in FCS, or that almost beat one of a team with one of the best defenses in FCS, Holy Cross. I mean, you just look at it like this is. I mean, anyone can beat anyone in the MEAC. I firmly believe that, and I don't think that's as true in the SWAC. So I hope Howard fans take that and believe it and support the team this year. And if there's a Truth and Service Classic, that they come out and really make the showcase game that the Bison are intending it to be.
Yeah, but I don't know. I'm intrigued to see what happens with the SWAC as well. You know, we had teams like Mississippi Valley State and Texas Southern show us that they have young talent there. Whether or not that talent can continue to grow and take that step forward, because we already know the big boys like Southern, Jackson State, and Grambling, they've already most definitely reloaded and are prepared to face each other. I'm just intrigued to see. Oh, and Florida A&M, let me not forget about them too. I'm intrigued to see if those two programs, who a lot of people has considered to be also rans in the past few years, teams that have actually played decent against the better opponents in the conference, whether or not they can make that step and continue to be competitive in that conference. It's not as wide open as the MEAC, most definitely not. But it still had its moments where it seemed like it was relatively competitive, especially with Mississippi Valley State in the way that they surprised me with their competitiveness in games, and with that young team that they have, whether or not they're capable of flipping it over and hitting that switch and being competitive, with the fact that, God, I can't name necessarily a recruit that's come in with Mississippi Valley State, but we can sure point out those that have come through with Jackson State and Grambling. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see whether or not they're capable of competing again this season or not.
Yeah, and I'll go back to. I mean, I'm excited too. I mean, I kind of wrote off Texas Southern, to be honest. Haven't really looked at their record because it's been a while since the Bobby Reed days, back in the late 2000s. Certainly been a while. I mean, no insults to them. It's just the truth. But young talent, all it takes is, I guess, the right, chemistry and the right, I guess, coaching formula for that to show up. But going back to the MEAC, I think I'm more excited about the MEAC too, because I can't believe I didn't think I'd ever do this, but I'm going to do a hockey comparison. Being a big history guy, the original six, the NHL is in bad shape after a few teams, contracted during the Depression. And then now you have a similar sort of environment where you have teams leaving the conference and you have 6 teams. And it's just more competitive now because, there's less room. There's less people, I guess, less hands reaching for, for the stew. I guess less spoons in the stew. More people are less teams competing, more competitiveness, and I guess a smaller gap between the top and the bottom. So it sort of feels like an original 6 type feeling in the MEAC, and I'm excited for that reason too. And I think the MEAC's got that staying power for a long time. I guess, because of that original 6. I don't see them expanding, for a while like the NHL did, in the original 6 era.
Neither do I, right? And it's basically because, well, not basically, but the teams in which they've talked about adding to the conference, with the exception of, it's been mainly Chicago State and Kentucky State. Kentucky State, of course, is the program that has the football team. Chicago State does not. And even with the addition of them, it's a possibility that they may be able to come through and be competitive too. Because we looked at 4 teams that were vying for the championship last year, with South Carolina State, yes, winning the championship. North Carolina Central being a game away from winning it. Well, of course, that loss to South Carolina State was what knocked them out. Norfolk State, which basically ran the conference until those last 2 games of the season. And then again, Delaware State, with 3 losses on their schedule, again, like I said before, which were by a combined 16 points. You had those three teams that were extremely competitive and were competing for a title. And then you had Howard, even though they weren't necessarily in the title hunt, they're still relatively young. And the games in which they played in, they were still competitive in those games too. So it's and then of course we don't know what's going to happen with Morgan State with their new head coach that they have coming in. So I'll be intrigued to see exactly how this plays out myself.
Exactly. I mean, I think it's great. Like, yeah, 2/3 of the league was in the race. And I mean, we've said it before, the 5-game season. Like, if you're a team like Delaware State, it doesn't matter that you lost to Georgetown. It doesn't matter that you lost to Merrimack. You can still compete for a title. And I mean, I love the MEAC for that reason. I love the SWAC for that reason. I mean, well, not so much the SWAC because, there's less of a non-conference schedule, but you get some really weird quirks, where Delaware State had arguably one of the worst non-conference resumes imaginable, and they still almost ended up winning a national championship. So,
Yeah.
I can't wait. I mean, I'm already getting excited about this.
You have me chomping at the bit, and my God, I'm again, it's going to be very intriguing because that's been one of the talking points ever since December is how respected the Celebration Bowl is going to look outside of HBCU football fandom when you have a team that was sub 500 to come in and knock off a team that was 11-1, 11-2 in Jackson State. Will it happen again this upcoming season? And depending upon how, God, no one thought South Carolina State would do it last year. There's an opportunity that it can happen again where a sub 500 team from the MEAC that has a wonderful in-conference record could come in and be a bully to a SWAC team again. So, I don't put anything past anyone anymore based upon what I saw just a few months ago.
I mean, yeah, I totally agree. And something I thought about too in this, this current HBCU and college football climate is it feels like AFL versus NFL. The MEAC being the AFL, where everyone's writing them off because of the situation, but they're performing. They're looking like the 68 Jets, they're looking like the 69 Chiefs, and they're performing and turning heads and doing it decisively. So, we'll have to see. Very, very excited too. It's a shame we have to wait 5 months and some change for some HBCU football, but man, you like you said earlier, it's always, the stove's always hot.
It's always hot, and at least this time I could kind of, regenerate and get some rest after April. Well, yeah, after April, I'll just be focusing primarily on track and field events and how HBCUs participate within their conferences, and then of course to see how North Carolina A&T does on a national stage. Of course, with this upcoming weekend, you have the indoor track and field championships for both Division I and Division II coming up. So I'm most definitely going to keep my eyes on that. But until then, until August comes around, I'll be watching that and resting up and getting myself ready.
Absolutely. I mean, and that's all you can do for just a great spring sports slate, especially with the NCAA and their great track program. A lot to look forward to. I'm excited to say less, sound like a broken record. I think I don't have anything else to say. Duane, do you have anything final to add?
Not much, but I mean, spring football is right around the corner. So we when that comes around in a couple of weeks, now we get to speculate about that, and based upon what we see there, how lineups and starting lineups will look for these programs, and who's going to be competing for what position, who has what cemented, and how they potentially will end up competing within their respective conferences. So technically we have maybe 3 weeks off, but until then.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. I mean, it is scrimmages to me. I mean, I want teams playing each other. That's I'm not satisfied by spring football, honestly. I mean, it's just a scrimmage in the end. But until next time, it's always a pleasure, Duane. Had a fun time.
Always.
And yeah, until next time, tune in, guys. Enjoy the discussion, and peace, love, and soul, everyone.